Hello, and it's that time of week again that we get ready for Shabbat in just a little while. And as we said in our promotion, Shabbat is a special gift of 25 hours to reflect, to reconnect with people, and to be able to really think about important issues that sometimes, just because of the rush and the intensity of the week, we don't necessarily have time to do. And in fact, this week has gone so quick. I don't know for you guys, but these weeks are really going very quick. And we're here again for that special time of Shabbos. So I'd like to begin with a story. There's once a fellow, a robber, who went into the bank and held up the banker, the teller. And she says, "Your money or your life." And the teller sees this robber and says, "Hey, sir, I'll give you the money, but on your way out, you're really going to get beat up bad. I'm not sure it's worth it." And the robber says, "I don't care. That is what I like, money or your life." And the teller says one more time, "I'm telling you, I'll give you the money, but your life isn't going to last too long on your way out." And the robber again says, "Money or your life." So she gives him the money. And he has this big bag of money. He's so happy. On his way out, obviously, she pressed the panic button, and the guards are there. They hold this guy. They, really beat him up, beat him down to the floor. He's like all out. His eyes are all bruised up. And about 20 minutes later, he opens up an eye, and he starts to get his consciousness back. And this teller is standing right in front of him and says, "Sir, I told you this was going to happen." To which this robber replied, "You told it to me, but they explained it." My friends, COVID has brought many different issues to the fore and has created a lot of different realities for many people, unsettled realities, but on the other hand, brought some positive things to many people's lives. And as we slowly get out of where we were, at least, it's time to reflect on certain things that we've learned, certain things that have been challenged, and how do we grow as people from this incredible experience that we've had. Not necessarily good, but certainly incredible. And one of the things that I was thinking about lately was the issue of trust, about trusting those that are in the position to make decisions for you, whether family, community, government, local. There's so many decisions that had to be made, and so much trust that was placed in the hands of other people as we move through this pandemic. And I can't say that the trust people have come out more trusting or less trusting, but certainly, do we trust what we are being told by whoever it is that you're questioning? And this, of course, comes to the fore when it comes to vaccinations. A lot of the issues of vaccinations are, should you take it? Shouldn't you take it? Who do you trust? Which data do you trust? Which vaccine is better? And the fact that recently one of the vaccines or a few of the vaccines have run into challenges, and I'm not giving any analysis or recommendation one way or the other. I'm just stating the fact. It has again evoked a question of how much trust do we put into people, into organizations, or into anything. And at the end of the day, a lot of our life is based on trust, based on trusting the people that we respect and honoring what they say. So trust is a very important quality of life, and certainly something that has been re-examined in all of our lives over the past year. And in this week's Parsha, as we've always say, and I'll constantly say this, that although the Torah was written thousands of years ago, the messages are so timely because the Torah was given to us to give us guidance about issues. The stories and the details that are written in Torah, in a sense, are secondary to the messages that are being imparted to us through them. And those messages are constantly relevant to us as they were then. Just like thousands of years ago, you needed to eat to be alive. The fact that we've evolved over these last thousands of years since Torah was written didn't change the fact that you have to eat and that you have to breathe, because there's certain realities of life that are eternal and are timeless. And there's such a timely and timeless message in this week's portion that I believe is so applicable to the times we live in as we start to question and re-examine the issue of trust and whom to trust and how to trust, especially in light of this last week when certain questions were raised about certain things we trusted in. So let's talk about this week's portion. This week's portion is called Sazria and Mitzora. It talks about a very unusual disease called saras. Now, there's something very unusual in this week's portion. We have ever heard of the concept called a Kohen? You know, the Kohen gets being first called to the Torah. The Kohen is usually translated as the priest, but it's really not an accurate translation. The Kohen was the family and the tribe that was delegated, that was appointed to be able to do the services in the temple on behalf of the Jewish people. In the times of the desert, when the Torah was given to us, the Kohen Gadol, the chief Kohen, was Aaron. Now, there's something very interesting. Throughout the entire Bible, throughout the entire Torah, the word Kohen is mentioned 306 times throughout the entire 5 books of Moses. And guess what? In this week's portion alone, it's mentioned 106 times. We will come across the word Kohen. That means just over 1/3 of the entire conversation about the Kohen in the entire Torah takes place in this singular portion. That means the Kohen is playing a very significant role in what it is that the Torah is trying to tell us and teach us in this week's portion. So what is it that we find in this unusual word Kohen so many times? Who is this Kohen? And what's the Torah telling us? So the Torah is basically telling us when there is this unusual disease that afflicts a person that is called sara'at. Now, it's usually translated as leprosy, but it's not the typical leprosy. It's a very unusual skin disease, or sometimes you find it on the buildings as well, called sara'at. There's different infections that are seen in the skin. So the Torah tells us that you take it to the Kohen to observe and to see if in fact it is sara'at. And in the course of telling us how involved this Kohen is in determining the disease and how to deal with it 106 times. Not once do we mention, go to the doctor. My son, the doctor. You know, this is Torah. Not one word of the doctor in this week's portion. So who is this Kohen that we have to go and has the authority to determine a medical issue, seemingly? And why not go to the doctor? It could have said, hey, go to the Kohen or the doctor, or Dr. Cohen. We know many Dr. Cohens. Go to him. You have to go to the Kohen who was living at that time. So who's this Kohen? No medical qualification is going to tell me if I have a disease and how to cure from this disease? And the answer is, of course, another question. What is this disease, sarat? So as we mentioned, sarat is a disease on the skin, but the Torah tells us that this is not a usual disease. This is not your usual leprosy. In this particular disease, the Torah says, if you find this type of thing going on in your skin, know that this is not a medical condition, but this results from a spiritual deficiency that you have. And in order to determine if this is a spiritual issue, not a medical issue, you have to go to the Kohen. And the Kohen, who is has spiritual qualifications, he will be the one to determine how to deal with this spiritual disease. So what we see is that this is not a physical or medical issue. It's an issue associated, as many of our commentaries say, with talking lashon hara, speaking badly about other people. But the issue is not necessarily about why it comes. The issue is that it is a spiritual disease. And for spiritual disease, you need to go to the Kohen. Why? And here's the punchline. Because the remedy for this disease was to quarantine this individual, send him out of away from the entire Jewish people until it will heal. He had to be alone. He had to be disconnected. He has to be sent away from his normal routine. He has to be set aside until he can recover. Now think about the impact of this, something that we can really understand after the last year. When you quarantine and when you're disconnected, and mind you, you're disconnected without the internet, without cell phones, without mail, without any form of communication that we have today. This is going back 3,000 years ago. What is the impact it has on the human being? What's the mental impact? What is it? What's the emotional impact? So just to say that you take a guy or a woman who has this disease and send them out of the camp for a while, that's not such a simple thing, because you have to consider all the ramifications that take place. And therefore the Torah says, who can make that decision, which is not medical, but has emotional and mental ramifications? You must go to Aaron, you must go to the Kohen, you must go to the priest. Why? Because a Kohen has a unique quality of chesed, of kindness and love. Aaron was distinguished from Moses, who was the greatest teacher, the greatest prophet. But nonetheless, Aaron was chosen to be the Kohen because he displayed a quality of unconditional love and peace and understanding that didn't exist with others. And in fact, if a Kohen is not a loving person, if a Kohen is a controversial person, he cannot do all the service that is needed in the temple. Because one of the basic criteria of being a successful Kohen is to make sure you have love and compassion for the other person. And only a person who has love and compassion for the other can diagnose something that will have an emotional and mental impact on that person as well. We cannot rely just on the medical condition. We cannot just rely on the physics of healing this particular disease. This is a spiritual disease with great impact beyond just the physical ailment, which requires the expertise of a Kohen, the expert lover of other people, the expert kind person and gentle person. And if he determines that you have to go out of the camp to heal, then you know it's coming from a position of kindness and love, and you will in fact heal. And this is something that is always in every aspect of life. It's not always the data. It's not always the facts that are in front of you. Sometimes there are the intangibles. In parenting, when you see a child who's misbehaving, or you see a child who is not doing something that should be done, you can't just always go and punish them because they didn't follow the rules. A loving parent, a kind parent, will discipline the child, but will take account in the discipline the intangibles of this child to make sure that the discipline, in fact, helps the child recover from their mistake instead of digging it worse and making it worse. Same thing in business. Same thing in medicine. When you go to a doctor, I know a number of doctors who told me that when they deal patients with cancer, sometimes, although there is a technique to heal the cancer, but the person will live better with the cancer than living without it and moving it. And the data will prove that this is a cancerous, life-threatening disease. But the living with it, the doctor knows that intangible ability. Can the person deal with the necessary steps that have to be taken physically, or that will kill them before the cancer will kill them? The same thing is in business. The same thing is with any profession. We don't just go to people who know the facts and who understand the facts, and therefore, if this happens, then that happens. That's not proper training. That's not the way they trained me when I was a rabbi. They don't teach us all the laws, and they don't teach us every eventuality. True training is to be able to determine what needs to be done and how to involve your intuition to be able to do it properly. In Philadelphia now, there's a big conversation about sports. Are our teams relying too much on analytics? Are our teams relying too much on data to determine their moves as opposed to gut? Sometimes data will tell us to play a game this way, but the player at the plate or on the field or on the court or wherever they are sometimes has an intuition to do it a little differently. Data is very valuable, but the Torah is telling us that there are intangibles. And when you make a decision regarding other people's lives, the emotional well-being, the mental well-being of that particular individual, whether it's your child, whether it's your spouse, whether it's your employer, whether it's your employee, whether it's your coworker, you may be able to discipline and be right for correcting what they have done. But if you just do it on a purely external level without the Kohen aspect, then you may be doing more damage than what you're trying to correct. And this becomes a very important message. When it comes to spiritual ailments, when it comes to discipline, when it comes to helping another person, don't forget that intangible of love. When you want to correct someone, when you want to tell them what to do, when you want to tell them why they did something wrong, is it coming from a place of love? Or is it coming from a different place in your heart? We can't deal with the country. I'm not here to discuss decisions that were taken on a national, global level. I feel totally unqualified to do that because I don't know everything that's there. And sometimes emotional impact doesn't suffice to prevent others. But I'm talking about what we can learn from this whole experience of how we approach and trust things that were imposed upon us in how we communicate to other people. And it's not only a question is who do you trust? Do you want to be trusted? If you talk to someone, how can you be trusted? And this is the answer. The answer is in this parsha. Make sure that you act as the Kohen. You may not be a Kohen, and your name may not be Kohen, but it doesn't mean that you can't approach assessing a situation and determining a step of action in your interaction with others to make sure it comes from a place of love. When you want to talk to someone about an issue, ask yourself, is this coming from a space of kindness within me? Then move ahead. Certainly don't talk to someone about correcting what they've done from a place of anger, because then it's certainly not going to be as effective as it should be. I'm going to conclude with two little stories. One with the previous Rebbe, and one is with the current, with our Rebbe. So the previous Rebbe was getting a vaccine for something, and obviously his arm was very clean, but the doctor does what doctors still do today: take an alcohol, something dipped in alcohol, and although your arm is clean, they still rub it with alcohol. So the previous Rebbe turns to his doctor and says, why is that necessary? My hand is totally clean. What are you concerned about? And he told the Rebbe that there's only so much you can clean. But sometimes there's these little particles, like you can't, microscopic, that when you inject the body with the needle, it could go in and could cause infection. So the alcohol kills off all the germs, kills off anything, any bacteria, anything that can get into the body. And here the Rebbe said he learned the lesson. The Rebbe learned the lesson that when you inject something in someone else, when you are giving someone a prick with the needle, which causes a little bit of pain, make sure that there aren't any particles of hate or judgment about that other person. Make sure even in the most emotionally microscopic way that you're pure in your conversation with the other people. Then what you will offer will be received in a very healthy way. And I heard a very cute story recently, which I think explains this issue. I don't have the quote in front of me, but explains this in a very interesting way. There's once a rabbi, a Chabad shliach, back in the 70s or late 60s, And I'm making sure that we go back to the context, because if you all remember, I was a little kid then, but in the late 60s, smoking wasn't a big deal. Everybody would smoke up and light up and smoke a cigarette. So this particular rabbi was a chain smoker, as they say, and he was a director of a camp. And even back then, some of the parents felt that it wasn't appropriate. Actually, it wasn't. It was the late 70s. It wasn't appropriate for him to be smoking so much. It's not healthy. He was like, especially when he was under stress. And they said, Rabbi, it's just not healthy. Don't smoke. Stop smoking. And he just couldn't. So they said, all right, do you mind if we write a letter to the Rebbe? We'll write a letter and tell the Rebbe to tell you to stop smoking. So he said, listen, I can't stop you from doing what you'd like. And a day later, apparently, he gets a phone call from the Rebbe's secretary late at night that the Rebbe is concerned about his health. And the rabbi tells Rabbi Mendel, who was the Rebbe's secretary, I'm pretty healthy spiritually. I feel like, unless it's a spiritual thing that the Rebbe's asking about, physically I seem to be fine. And Rabbi Mendel says, in the name of the Rebbe is not talking about your spiritual health. The Rebbe wants to make sure that you do everything you can to secure and to maintain a physically healthy lifestyle so that the people around you won't be affected by bad choices. Something to the effect, and I meant to bring it with me, but something to the effect the Rebbe told him that you're a part of an army and the people in your unit cannot be detrimentally affected by the lack of healthy decisions, of anti-healthy decisions that you take. The rabbi, needless to say, quit his smoking right then and there. So let me ask you a question. These people were nudging him the whole time to stop smoking. And here, one phone call from the Rebbe and he stopped. Now you could say, well, that's the way Chabad rabbis work. The Rebbe tells you to stop, you stop. But that's not what the Rebbe told him. The Rebbe didn't tell him to stop smoking. The Rebbe told him to take care of his health. The Rebbe told him how valuable, how important it is to take care of his health. Well, that's a whole different conversation, and that he stopped smoking. So this is the point. When you come to a person, stop smoking, smoking is terrible from you, there's a lot of judgment many times in that saying. And I'm using this as an example when we talk to people about other decisions they make medically. You have to do this and you can't do that and you shouldn't do that and why are you doing this? There's a lot of judgment. And therefore, it doesn't lead to positive conclusions. But if the conversation is out of genuine concern for the other person's health, for genuine concern for the other person, the conversation is taking place on a completely different level and can therefore be more effective. This is a message that we can take in every aspect of our life. We're living now in very emotional times that everybody's so emotionally charged, with so many different decisions that have to be made and are being made for you, and decisions that you're making for others. There is a time that we have to recognize the emotional state, not only the emotional state that you are in, but the emotional state that the other person is in, and be aware of the times. And therefore, when you're about to talk to someone about something sensitive or delicate, think twice. And when I say think twice, I mean think once about what your true feelings are about this issue and about the other person, and then think the second time about where are they coming from? What kind of impact will this have on them? And we know this. We know that despite all the deaths that came out of COVID-19 directly, how many mental health issues are there? How many suicides took place? Because people weren't being dealt with in the appropriate manner, taking into consideration the emotional and mental state of health that they're in. So think twice. Don't just think about your feelings. Think about where are your feelings coming from? Where are the other person's feelings? And if you think twice, you will be a lot more effective and people will be feeling so much better. So as they say in construction, measure twice and act once. Let this be an important lesson as we move forward in our relationships and communication and interaction with other people, that most people, 99.9% of people mean well. They just have to be spoken to well as well. And with that, my dear friends, I want to wish you all a good Shabbos, in where we can learn from each other, teach each other, learn how to realize that trust is generated when there's not just the repetition of facts, but it involves the emotional connection of a Kohen, and that our relationships will be healthier, and so much more will follow as well. So have a good Shabbos. Those who want to wish a good Shabbos, you can now post it on the site if you want to wish to your friends. I see here's Judy Feiner. All right, do we have her? Let me move this out of the way. Judy's wishing everyone a good Shabbos. Good Shabbos to you. Anita Walensky. Hi, Anita. Hope all is well. Good Shabbos to you as well. Let's see if there's any. Oh, here we have Daniel Jacob. Hey, Daniel Jacob. Good Shabbos to you. Good to hear from you. Arlene wants to wish everyone a good Shabbos. I really enjoy your messages. Here we have Sherry. Sherry's here. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for inspiring words. My pleasure, Sherry. We should always be able to share good words together. Mara. Thank you, Rabbi Shem Tov. Shabbat Shalom. Wendy's wishing everyone. Thanks, Rabbi. Shabbat Shalom. This is a Shabbat Shalom to the whole community. This is a community effort until we can all celebrate together. Chaim. Hey, hi, Chaim. Good to hear from you. Judy Feiner. Barry wishes everyone a good Shabbos as well. Yeah, Barry, thanks. Good to see you in Shul again, and can't wait to see everybody as everyone slowly comes together. Harris, great message. Thanks, Rabbi. Good Shabbos to one and all. Good Shabbos to everyone. Harry Bernard. Howard. Good Shabbos to all. Thank you, Rabbi Shem Tov. My pleasure. Good Shabbos, Howard. Good Shabbos to everyone. And hopefully we'll see you again, if not in person, but in our broadcast, Mirza Shem, please God, next Friday night. And let's think about this message. And oops, I see somebody else posted. I see. Okay. And hopefully next week we'll see you again. And as we prepare all the different programming that's coming up, stay tuned. In the meantime, have a wonderful and meaningful Shabbos. Take care.